Hello everyone, welcome to the Varanus podcast on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Tonight I'm joined by Will Scott again, come for part two. He's done a really good presentation on the tristis complex. There's been a recent paper, so we're going to get into that. So for any of the audio listeners, this is definitely one you're going to want to watch on the YouTube, because there's lots of pictures. A lot of stuff we'll be going over. It'll be a lot easier to see with pictures. But I'll bring Scott on now. Will on now. God, I always do that, Will. Always calling you Scott.
Good,
How we going, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate.
Oh, good. So yeah, like I was saying, you put together this amazing presentation. Do you want to just go into sort of an overview of what we'll be talking about tonight?
Yeah. So primarily, I think we're just going to be summarising the recent paper from last year that kind of went about looking at the genetics of tristis, and subsequently elevating this tristis and orientalis subspecies to species status, as well as finally publishing a little bit of work that is relevant to the Scalaris complex after all these years as well, which is nice to see.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Like I said, we'll get into it in a bit more detail to wrap it up. But like I said, we'll probably do the Scalaris one with this again. So we'll repeat this new species that come up. That was a nice finding on this paper that they've been separated out. But yeah, there's a lot of misconception just with, as I said, we'll get into this presentation of the coloration of these tristis and stuff. But now we've got this presentation together. Hopefully it makes it a bit more clear for people.
Yeah, for sure, man. Particularly, hopefully some of the overseas, I guess, monitor enthusiasts or keepers and whatnot, might be able to take away something that they can apply to their own animals, particularly as to whether or not they might have, tristis or orientalis in their collections.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, mate. Well, I'll load up this presentation and we'll get straight into it, I think.
Yep.
There we go. All good, mate. So take it away.
Yeah, man. So I don't know, just an introductory slide there with a photo of a tristis from central West Queensland. But yeah, feel free to flick over to the first one there. We'll get going.
So just talking about. Go on, mate.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just so this is the primary publication, so paper that we're going to be drawing on for this, just to give them full credit like this. But yeah, there we go. Beautiful. I'm 100% just doing my best as kind of a more, a less of an academic kind of perspective, a bit more of a herper / keeper, just trying to summarize and build upon these guys' work, which is, it's extremely good work. I definitely recommend everyone, if you have an interest in these species, go read the full paper. And yeah, you'll get a much better understanding than what I can really give you. But I guess what hopefully we're going to go through is sort of more the visual component as it's relevant to the hobby, I guess. And yeah, definitely check it out, guys. It's awesome work.
Yeah, it's really in depth. Like I said, I messaged you straight away when I found out about it, and then I couldn't understand most of it. It's super in depth, unlike some other papers that have been published recently. This didn't go into any detail, really, which we'll be talking about in the future, no doubt. But yeah, like really in depth. If you're into your genetic work and stuff like that, it's just insane. But like I said, this hopefully is a bit more for the layman, what we're doing here, and a bit more visual than what this paper is. But yeah, amazing job by all the authors there. And yeah, definitely check it out.
Cool. All right. So just on this first slide here, we've got a couple of figures just briefly from the paper just to cover them. So on the left there, we have kind of their phylogenomic outline of the tristis, split into, I guess you'd say, a handful of different genetic clusters. And on that, that's also then shown on the figure to the right with the map. And basically, through their research, they found 6 more or less distinct genetic clusters, but in the species that they broke into the Southwest WA cluster, a widespread cluster, Central Australian one, the top end, and then a southeastern and a northeastern cluster. And you can see how those are distributed across the country there. And you'll also notice those pie charts. So they are representative of an individual specimen or record and its respective genetic makeup. And as you can see, there is a fair amount of genetic admixture across a lot of the species distribution based on the records they have. And it's pretty damn thorough. Like, they did a really good job of covering as much of the country as they could, with, I guess, the exception of maybe a little bit of like the Gulf of Carpentaria and northwest Queensland, and obviously the interior of WA there. But like, that's pretty remote country to get a specimen.
Yeah.
So I think they've done a good job.
So when you talk about admixture, Will, is that they were sort of interbreeding with the other races? Is that how it seems?
Yeah. So I think keepers and herpers that aren't really too familiar with, I guess, the more evolutionary biology side of things have to realize, though, when we say things are, mixing or crossbreeding, it's more of a like on an evolutionary time scale of millions of years. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean. There's basically, it's saying that there's been gene flow between these populations over the course of eons, as the country's changed and the climate's changed, and populations have sort of waxed and waned and move around depending on environmental conditions.
Right. But they did there is these clusters that there just wasn't enough DNA basis to split them enough on there, or even make them subspecies, or do you think the authors didn't want to do that, or it's just because there was that admixture there?
So as you'll see in that phylogenomics figure there, you'll see the widespread cluster is kind of evenly distributed throughout a lot of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Basically suggesting that you've got this arid adapted lineage that's potentially, I guess, on a evolutionary time scale, maybe more recent than recently emerged than some of the others. I'd have to double check that. But basically, it's spread out across arid Australia and facilitated gene flow between these populations. So because of that, you can't really clearly split those individual populations off and say that they're isolated and distinct, which I think we'll get into a little bit more detail as well.
Okay. So
yeah, so as you can see, that first line there is basically there's significant admixture between the widespread and pretty much all the other clusters for the most part, with the exception of the northeastern cluster from northeastern Australia. There's a bit of the genetic admixture between the southeastern and the widespread lineage is a bit limited because there's only one individual. But I'd say if you looked at the tristis from northwest Queensland and as they get into the Barkly Tableland and all that, like, you'd probably find a bit more going on there. That might just be to do with the sampling.
Right.
And also, interestingly enough, there was no admixture between northeast and southeast, even though they approached each other very significantly. It might even be sympatric in the vicinity of, say, like Lake Buchanan, as we'll get into later. Like, I think there's probably more sympatric distributions than that, most likely. And yeah, so basically, the northeastern lineage was found to be significant enough from the remainder of these other clusters, that it is a distinct species. And given that cluster is, essentially where is the distribution of Orientalis, based on the holotype, they chose to elevate Orientalis from tristis.
Yeah. From Tristis orientalis to its own species now, Varanus orientalis. So
yeah.
Before they didn't really have this. This is why this paper's so good, and a lot of misunderstanding, I guess, with just because they had a faded head or not a darker head, they're not orientalis, and that's what sort of happened in the hobby. I mean, we'll probably go through these first, Will, and then sort of explain. It'd probably be a bit easier to explain why that's not the case. But yeah, it'd be interesting for people overseas to see, just because it hasn't got a dark coloured head and sort of orange spotting, that it's not orientalis.
Yeah, and just on that last slide quickly, just that last point there, just if it's of interest to anyone, to give you an idea of the time frame on these things. That I think they determined that Orientalis split from Tristis, approximately 3 million years ago, in the late Pliocene, which is, the country would have been a very different time back then, right? So you got to wonder how long maybe that those two lineages were isolated, potentially, and had time to diverge, versus some of the more recent splits that are still, kind of considered tristis,
Yeah. for sure. Yeah, that's a long way away. You know, some of the tree monitors are split off probably in the last 20,000 years, maybe even less than that, with the land bridges, which obviously you haven't got in Australia so much. But yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this is probably of interest to particularly people wanting to distinguish what they have in the hobby. But basically, Orientalis, this is verbatim from the paper, can be distinguished from Tristis by possessing a distinct dark postocular stripe and a reticulated dorsal pattern that extends anteriorly onto the head, or into the head. And basically, this is pretty consistent with what I've seen in the bush, and a lot of other people I know have, is that Orientalis tend to have quite heavily patterned heads, as in like the top of the head, whereas Tristis, it tends to be kind of without pattern and more of a uniform color.
Yeah. And then
also sorry, you go for it, man. You know what you're talking about as well.
Sorry. Well, I haven't seen as many as you, for sure, and yeah, they're tricky. It wasn't until I got over to Australia and found that one in Broome that we were sort of coming up, and I was like, oh, for sure we'd call that Orientalis. But that was way out of their range. We weren't even anywhere near, which is the Orientalis range now. But yeah, like you're saying, seems to be the main distinguishing features, that postocular stripe, and then we've probably got some better pictures a bit further along of the head. Is anything else on that one?
I threw that photo there specifically because it's an Ori that's kind of like showing a little bit of variation from the norm.
Yeah.
But that animal, I'll have photos in later from literally the exact same location. Photos taken within a K or even a few hundred meters of animals that are super typical. But it's just, there is a little bit of variation either side, which is but you can definitely tell. Trust me, it's not a subtle thing once you've got a good number of these animals in front of you. Particularly in the wild, having a look at them.
Yeah.
Also worth stating that they found that while the Orientalis are generally smaller, there was no significant difference between the mean length of the SVL, so snout to vent length. But it is anecdotally, I'd say the southern Orientalis tend to be, generally smaller than the northern ones, whilst the northern ones definitely get up there, and they're comparable with Tristis. Like I've seen some big Orientalis in North Queensland, whereas the southern ones, I haven't seen any. I'd struggle to say I've seen one that would be longer than, say, 60 centimeters total length.
Okay, yeah, that was interesting to me, because from the Australians I was speaking to before, they were like, oh no, all the Oris are like a really small monitor. Then I obviously spoke to you, Will, and you were like, no, they can get up there with the normal Tristis.
Yeah, it's I think depends on who you talk to. If you're from the hobby, I know, like years ago, like maybe 5-10 years ago, most of the Orientalis that were from like the southern half of their range in Queensland. And so maybe that came from that. Whereas the North Queensland Oris, like they only really started popping up and being bred, maybe around 2010s, like maybe a little bit earlier, but maybe that's where that came from. And then also with the color variation, is that what the study found to be a freckled pattern was only found in Orientalis. And then interestingly, with the head colorations, obviously we have the distinctive, heavily patterned, heads on Oris, but also with, light versus dark heads, which was thought to be potentially a diagnostic characteristic for a period of time, was found that is independent of Orientalis completely, and that is, Tristis and variation basically, as they approach the equator. So as they approach the equator, they tend to have lighter colored heads, and further away they tend to have, darker colored heads, which, thermal melanism and all that, like, they can marry the ones. So yeah, you go.
No, it makes sense. Obviously, they say about like black-headed pythons, which don't know if that's true yet. They say they come out the hole and warm up the heads. Doesn't really make sense with them because they're from a pretty warm climate anyway. But yeah, I guess diamond pythons would probably be a better example within sort of the carpet python range. As they get colder, they get darker, just easier for them to warm up. And as you see a bit later with those ones from southwest Australia around Perth and stuff, are really dark animals. So yeah, that sort of proves that point really well. As they get warmer, they get lighter. Which is interesting. But you're saying that the Orientalis don't do that at all. They haven't got any variation in their head color at all.
No, not from what I've seen. Like, and it's okay. if you have maybe a slightly darker oriental, it's like that's more of a uniform thing, you know, that the head coloration isn't really distinct from the rest of the animal.
Yeah.
And also, as you said, with like black-headed python, that's exactly what my thoughts went to as well. You know what I mean? And in, you know, the arid interior of continental Australia, I mean, as you probably know, like it gets very, very cold out there over the cooler months. You know, Central Australia can be absolutely freezing. You know.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
And honestly, I think in the cooler months, you know, even if they're not all that active, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if you get the odd animal on a slightly less frigid day, you know, comes out and warms up, and you know, it's probably advantageous to be darker than it is to be lighter, you know, in those sorts of areas.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's loads of stuff. Loads of stuff in Europe and stuff. Some lacertid lizards in the colder population. Adders, for example, Viperia berris. As you get more north, they tend to be more melanistic. So it's just easier to absorb that heat. But yeah, it shows it really well in these tristis, which almost look like completely different animals, which we'll see in a minute. Those ones from Perth, you would say were completely different. You know, the ones in Broome, just by that sort of patterning. They almost look like a tricolored monitor, where they got a lot of nice pattern in the middle, and then really dark tails and really dark heads as you get further south.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So this is literally what we were just talking about. I'll bring this up.
Yeah, so to start us off here, we've got these were identified as a distinct genetic cluster of tristis from southwest Western Australia. So I think most of us that are familiar with these would be very familiar with the term Perth Hills, although these animals occupy a much larger region than just the vicinity of Perth. I think just to touch on, when I say that, you know, when they talk about these being, you know, distinct lineages, at one point in time, they may have been on their way to being a distinct species from, say, you know, a population in the top end. It's just that, you know, this widespread tristis lineage is kind of, you know, spread out and potentially, you know, facilitate a gene flow between them. So it's kind of reversed speciation potentially, right? The paper that, you know, read the paper if you want more. I'm sort of doing very much layman's terms here, but back to these guys. Well, yeah, as you can see, the overall dark coloration is probably the main significant trait, as well as also these are a very large population of tristis, like easily the largest based on what I've seen, you know, with animals consistently getting, you know, over 70 centimeters total length, and, you know, the old animal, you know, particularly old males getting over 80 centimeters.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Are these pretty, like, phenotypically they're all like this, all dark? You never really get one that's light across there. I haven't seen anything myself. I haven't seen many from that sort of area. I'm usually trying to head north from Perth pretty quick.
Yeah. From what I've been told, there is a bit of variation, like in the dorsal pattern, right? So some animals, you know, you can have a lighter sort of section there on the dorsal side of the body, and you get a bit more distinct ocelli and a bit more light coloration. But overall, like, they're significantly darker than probably the remainder of the other populations, and obviously the head and the tail is very, you know, very dark compared to a lot of the others.
Yeah. Okay, you done with that one?
Let's try to think quickly. And one other thing, just to compare, this is fairly anecdotal, based on information from my mates. And so if anyone has any different information, they can obviously, I'd be keen to hear more. But these guys seem to breed a little bit differently to some of the other tristis types, where, you know, they do multiple clutches and sort of, you know, let's say maybe 6 to sort of 10 eggs potentially, right? These guys seem to be more of like a one clutch per season, and they'll do a lot of eggs, like, you know, like 15 plus sort of thing potentially. Just as a super anecdotal, and there's variation, but it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, probably makes sense where they wouldn't be able to multi-clutch. They're probably going through a pretty harsh winter, and then obviously just getting that one clutch in. So that's pretty interesting. That makes sense to me for sure.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, on to the next. Oh, yes, a nice photo from of a nice Perth locality individual there. And you can see it's got a little bit more pattern than some of those previous two shots.
Yeah, but still overall very dark, dark head as well. I'm not sure if these ever made it out of Australia. I don't think I've ever seen them. So these are really special.
I haven't seen them overseas, and honestly, mate, like even though they are here in Australia, they're not something that's really been, I guess you'd say, consistently produced. You know what I mean? As like some of the other dwarf monitors, like even though they're pretty very sought after, you sort of more of like someone gets them dialed in for a period of time and produces a good number, but then yeah, it seems to switch who's doing it every few years almost.
Right. How do the babies look, Will? Do they come out pretty dark, or are they pretty light and then darken up?
Yeah, so they're definitely a bit lighter and a bit more, I guess you'd say, obviously patterned than the adults. But compared to other localities of tristis, like in my opinion, from what I've seen, they are darker.
Overall darker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, cracker photo that is.
Definitely.
So same species still all Varanus tristis, but this is one that would probably get labelled as Orientalis overseas.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, to me, these are very much tristis, and these are almost the like the characteristic like tristis that you would have seen in the hobby, in years gone past. Like this is what you used to see as most common here in Australia. The old Alice Springs type tristis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was a distinct genetic cluster, found to be sort of more or less isolated to the rocky ranges of Central Australia, which I inferred as probably, like the McDonnell Ranges and the Musgrave and Man Ranges, in adjacent northernmost South Australia. But if, like I'm working with the information I have essentially, right? So these guys demonstrated significant admixture with that widespread group, and then minimal with the rest, right? So these guys, in a more arid period in recent history, like they might have been completely isolated to those rock escarpments and sort of refuge environments there in Central Australia.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to think about, and then obviously more recently these widespread ones have come in, and there's been gene flow potentially.
Been gene flow, yeah. These would be sympatric with Brettles pythons in the McDonald's and stuff like that, I take it.
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if are they completely split off now? They're just really a bredli, aren't they?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know how close. I think they were pretty close. I could be wrong. Nick Martin will be shouting at me.
Yeah, I'll leave that to Nick and those boys. Hey, I'm not going to comment.
Yeah, I don't know why I even said that. I was like, oh, were they? I just remember them being Bredel carpet pythons. They got called a lot, but yeah, I think they're really a Bredli. So yeah, that's interesting. Like I said, it's that habitat there. I'm sure these are probably a bit more widespread within that habitat than the Bredels are.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old tristis, mate.
Anything more to say on them, mate?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, just as you can see, the juveniles, they do tend to have a lighter head coloration than the adults. And even though I've included two kind of photos there, which are very clearly, the standard sort of, Alice Springs, rocky sort of escarpment, McDonnell Ranges type, you know what I mean? Like, it's just characteristic of what they look like. You do get a fair bit of variation pretty quickly, you know what I mean, as you sort of spread out throughout that region. And just these guys are relatively variable as well, just to be clear.
Yeah. And just want to shout, obviously, we have used some pictures throughout this, which we give credit to. Obviously, got Max on there and Jesse. So big thank you to those. I hope they don't mind us using them for this presentation. But yeah, we have credited all the photos. But yeah, big thanks to anyone that's we've got photos on throughout this presentation.
Yeah, probably should have mentioned that earlier. Hey, we sort of just went with it. So thanks everyone. We're not trying to annoy any of you. We just kind of, there's a lot of photos and a lot to cover. So we just, we did what we could.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Max is a good bloke anyway.
Yeah, so like Jesse's a great fella.
Yeah. And like I said, they're on Flickr, so we hopefully we're not going to get told off. But yeah, send all the emails to Will. It was his fault.
Oh.
It was me actually. So I'm sure if they're on Flickr, then we'll be allowed to use them. But yeah, big thanks, guys. I know a lot of work goes into to getting these shots. So yeah, I hope you're happy we're using them. There's a cracker from a classic Ross McGibbon shot there.
Yeah, it's a nice animal, and I just quickly noted it because it'll feature again. But I've got a photo of another individual from Warburton in another section. I'll touch on it when we get there, but you might notice it's a little bit different to this one. So this one's a lot more similar to those previous two shots with a slightly lighter head color.
Yeah.
And then you'll see when I'll point it out when we get to it, but you'll see there's a bit of some of the variation I'm talking about. So we'll just proceed for now. But yeah, cracker shot from Ross there. That's, you know, phenomenal.
Yeah. So these are quite far. That, if I'm not mistaken, Will, Warburton's quite far east of the McDonald's and stuff. So they have got quite a big distribution, these guys.
Well, by the time they're out there, there's going to be, I'd say, a fair bit of shared gene flow with the widespread ones.
Right.
But even if you don't, maybe, you know, you don't have to go back to it now, but on that distribution map with the different, you know, genetic clusters, even animals from Alice Springs appeared to show a fair bit of admixture with the widespread ones. And it was actually, I think, a couple of the records from northernmost South Australia that appeared to be like the most like true to type, I guess you'd say.
Right.
So yeah, it's a tricky one. You know what I mean? Like I'd love if anyone from the actual paper ever wants to go on and have a chat, I'd love to listen to what they have to say because they'll be able to cover it a lot more accurately than I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm hoping this is, I don't know if I could do a podcast with those guys when they start talking about mitochondrial DNA. Like I said, it's over my head. So I'm hoping this is a real layman's one, but yeah, maybe they'll get around to it and we'll get someone on that might be able to understand them a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's another one.
Yeah. Oh, and I realized, my apologies. I forgot to edit the caption on that one there. That's actually a phenomenal photo from Ian Bull.
Okay.
And that animal didn't have a specific location on it, but it was in an album title, you know, labeled South Australia. So I can only presume that one's probably from those, you know, those ranges in northernmost South Australia, kind of, you know, across the border from the NT.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to throw it in there because there's not a lot of photos from South Australia of tristis. There's very few from what I can find. So I wanted to throw that one in there as kind of, hopefully that's kind of doing a good job there. Yeah, exactly, of showcasing what they would be like there. And as I said, the records from South Australia in the paper appeared to be the most kind of genetically, you know, central type, just from what I can understand. So I think it was worth putting that one in there. And I apologize, Ian, if you know, on the off chance you do happen to listen to this. I stuffed up that label there, mate, but it's a great shot.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, big thanks to Ian there.
Here we go.
So moving on to these, top end. Go on, Will. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag, mate.
No, you're all good, mate. Honestly, you're more familiar with these than I am. I've only seen a handful, and I haven't even managed to get photos of them. Mate, what a cracking looking tristis these are.
Yeah, these are really cool. Yeah, this is the one I said to you. Have they sort of keyed out any different? Because they you know, I didn't find many. I think I found two. I only got put onto them with by Gavin actually. And he said, "Oh, if you've ever seen the tristis up here, they're really pretty and often have these sort of yellowish orange heads." I was like, "Oh no, do you know, just never bothered to think about looking for them up there. Always been too focused on the glebopalmas and glautia up there." So I was like, "Oh yeah," and literally, I found one under a little bit of bark. The first tree I went and sort of creeped under and had a look. There was under some bark, and then another one was hanging out in a fence post. It must have been the last wooden fence posts left in Australia because they've replaced them all by those steel ones now, which are no good for monitors. But the old wooden ones that are hollowed out in the middle. It literally driving past, it stuck his head up just like Gavin said it would be. And then when I'd look, and there's this beautiful orange head. But yeah, these appear to me to be a lot smaller than some of the other tristis. I don't know how. Like I said, I've only seen two. Do you know any more about that?
I've seen, I guess, two that would be consistent with this type. Both kind of in the vicinity of Adelaide River as opposed to Kakadu. But I didn't get photos, unfortunately. They were pretty onto me. But one was definitely a large adult male, and I'd put it up there with a lot of, you know, some of the tristis I've seen. It was a pretty good sized lizard. But these guys are an interesting one. So they kind of appear to be limited to, you know, sort of Arnhem Land. So, you know, Kakadu, East Arnhem, Darwin sort of area and surrounds down to, you know, by the time you get to Catherine, they're a little bit different looking. But,
right,
you know, that nice golden sort of yellow head coloration is pretty characteristic, as well as an overall sort of lighter dorsal sort of color. And with what you're saying, is certain populations from Kakadu National Park are very interesting, but that really requires some proper in-depth study. So obviously you get that isolated population of glorts there, which I'm just going to refer to as Balagardi. That comes from Sam Sweet, his study back in the 90s. But basically, it was a different study. This is from, I think, 2020 or 2021. This was actually, I have it there, 21. There we go. Obviously, Brennan et al. So they sampled what is considered to be a Balagardi specimen and found it was genetically extremely close to Tristis tristis. What was Tristis tristis at the time, right? That is, it's very interesting, right? Because then you also get this population of Tristis kind of in Kakadu and the rocky escarpment areas that, may potentially look a little bit more like the Balagardi than some of the Tristis in the surrounding savanna. So there's a lot there. Like someone's definitely going to get into it if they haven't. I think they might have already, but there's definitely some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I said, those ones that I found were right in where you'd find those Balagardi as they're being referred to here. So yeah, and then like I said, I haven't seen any from sort of further out from there. But yeah, they're right, as I think I got a picture coming up in a minute. It's right by the escarpment where I was hoping to get one of those Balagardi, Kakadu, Daltri. So
and also that
nice.
Top photo. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say that top photo by Jordan Mulder, that's a gorgeous shot. That's got to be one of the best Tristis shots, I reckon. Like, just a phenomenal animal, and he's done a great job with it,
Yeah, it looks really, really natural. Really nice. Yeah, I don't know if there was some orange head ones going in Europe, but I think they might have been those ones we were just speaking about before. They were calling them orange head orientals. So I never really got to see many of them. But I think they were the ones from the central ones we were just talking about before, which got a bit more of an orange head. Nothing like these sort of more yellowish golden sort of color. But yeah, these are cracker. People working with these in Australia, Will?
Not really. Like, at the end of the day, you never know what's out there. But there's certainly something that's been quite scarce in the hobby over the years. When they have popped up, you know what I mean? But I haven't seen any consistent sort of, work done with them or much in the way of, like definitive, breeding, you know what I mean? So hopefully they're still floating around out there, but definitely probably the scarcest of the Tristis types in the Australian hobby, I'd say.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that's my shot there. Like I said, you can see that escarpment sort of country where you get Oenpellis and those elusive Kakadu, Daltri. So, but yeah, I mean, I was stoked. I wasn't expecting to find it in the first tree. It made the day, to be honest. I was like, oh wow! and like I said, I wouldn't have bothered looking at. Hadn't been for Gavin, I wouldn't have bothered looking for it. So yeah, super nice.
Yeah. Was that one from Kakadu? I apologize. I put Kakadu on it because I assumed, but cool.
Yeah, no, Kakadu, mate. Yeah.
Yeah,
literally where you'd find those OPs.
Gotcha. Yeah, sweet.
So this is the widespread Tristis. This is the one that's caused it's causing a bit of all this problem where they're not being split. Then this is the most wide ranging one, and they look very variable just on the pictures you got there.
Yeah, for sure, man. So obviously, wherever these guys originated from, they spread out, and they've done a pretty damn good job of kind of adapting to essentially all of the arid and semi-arid and tropical environments of Western and Central and Northern Australia. Where Tristis occur. Obviously, I guess west of the Queensland Northern Territory border. And so as a result, as you can see, I've kind of done it there. So the top photo there is from the north of their range near Broome. And as you can see, closer to the equator there, we've got a bit of a lighter head, and then we've got one from the Pilbara, from Karajini, and down to that specimen from the vicinity of Warburton that I mentioned I was going to bring up. And sort of, as you can see, that one's, a very... Yeah, you think that's a really dark animal with like a more like densely arranged, like irregular ocelli, as opposed to that one I had there with the central ranges population.
Yeah.
And that's purely subjective by me, just because I'm trying to demonstrate that there is variation in localized populations. And I can talk about it more with the stuff I've personally seen and am familiar with, but just, you know, with the amount of genetic admixture between things, like, you know, it can be difficult to make clear calls sometimes. It's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, these in the hobby in Europe would be called Orientalis. So just to let everyone know, all these are now Varanus tristis. So yeah, you can see the wide range of these would get called these ones here would get called tristis in the hobby in Europe, and then these ones would be Orientalis, but these are all Varanus tristis.
Yeah, definitely. And those, like, those top end ones with the yellow heads as well, like even in Australian literature in the past, they've been referred to as Ories, which is, you know, definitely, which is, well, as we now have the genetics, so it's, we know that was you know, mistaken, I guess. But yeah, definitely the overseas stuff, like, they're gonna have to assess what they're keeping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've even got it in, I think it's Burns' book, the book of monarch lizards. I think they stated in there anything with a light colored head. And I think it even says it in that paper, Will, previous to this, you know, the genetic findings, anything, a lot of authors, anything with a light colored head was Orientalis, and then anything else was tristis. But now, obviously, we know they're just a very sort of widespread and very phenotypically different looking animal, but all tristis.
Yeah, definitely. And this population's an interesting one. Definitely, you know what I mean? Like the fact that they've managed to spread out through all these, you know, different climatically extreme regions and do really well with it. You know, it's pretty impressive, to be honest with you. And it's also a pattern that's kind of mimicked in Ackies, so ridge-tailed monitors, Varanus acanthoris. There's the paper that described the Gulf ridge-tailed monitor, Varanus citrinus, found a similar thing where you had this arid adapted lineage that kind of just spread out between what may have been formerly isolated populations and connected them all and facilitated gene flow. And and as we kind of covered there, it might have prevented or reversed the speciation of these, you know, populations that were once isolated, so sort of refuges, you know, during periods of, you know, adverse climatic conditions, like, you know, maybe the last, you know, sort of glacial maximums or whatever, you know, things were a lot cooler and drier and things really retreated to strongholds.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just a couple from when I seen these, I was like, oh yeah, but this is what my first started sort of researching the difference between Orientalis and tristis, because these are way away from where you'd get you know, Orientalis, but I would have called that, you know, going back 15-20 years, I would have called that Orientalis within Europe. So yeah, it's very interesting. Up in Broome there, really pretty animals.
Yeah, that one's gorgeous, mate. You've you got some good shots of it too.
Yeah, it was really easy, that one. It was actually in the hotel swimming pool. Literally went there. It was pretty right by it. Well, again, wasn't even looking for it. Didn't even think. I don't know why tristis hasn't been on the radar really. I've just been too focused on probably the other dwarf monitors up there in Broome. I don't know what I would even be looking for. Oh, Sparnus was always the big one to try and go find them. But yeah, I was and funnily enough, when you find one, they popped up everywhere then. Loads of little baby ones. I'd never found another adult up there, but loads of baby ones on the side of the trees, which I couldn't get very good shots of. But yeah, that's a cracker animal.
And yeah, there's just another photo off Flickr. Thank you to Chris Nucky of one from Lorna Glen Station, which really is from like the interior of Western Australia, just to give people another example of how variable these ones appear to be.
Yeah, really dark head again. So these are the ones I've never got to, never got to. You have to explain these guys.
Yeah, so these, I guess, look, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of samples from northwest Queensland, but basically I'm taking this population to essentially occur throughout Western Queensland, so west of the Carpentarian Gap, which we'll get into some of these, things like that a little bit later on, and down into northwest New South Wales, and likely adjacent, northeastern South Australia, right? But again, there's not a lot of photographic records from South Australia, so I can't comment too much. But yeah, these are quite a variable one. I've got a couple of photos there. One is one of my photos from, I guess, the fringes of a bioregion that's considered to be the Mulga lands in the interior of southern Queensland, and another one there from northwestern New South Wales, which is another good, awesome photo of a cracking tristis from Ken Griffiths.
Yeah.
And you can see that New South Wales one there is a bit darker, but that population there from the Mulga lands, that animal I photographed there was an adult female, and it had a relatively lighter coloured head, but you definitely do get darker sort of coloured ones, particularly the big males. Sometimes can be a bit darker, but it's just variable, as we'll cover it more as we go on.
Yeah.
There's a couple more. So there's one from a similar location. That one's from St. George. It's a nice, awesome in situ shot from young Damo, Damien Smidlers, who sent that to me to use. Thank you, Damo. And then traveling a bit further north there, that's one from central West Queensland. As you can see there, but that one's got a lighter head, but mate, I've found ones there and seen ones there that have got, completely jet black heads as well. So it's just a very variable population that the light-headed coloration doesn't really seem to get more prevalent until you get right up to northwest Queensland, like around sort of Djar and Mount Isa and beyond.
Yeah. They're very interesting. I mean, the more you think about them, I've been thinking about carpet pythons after that Breddles thing. They're almost like the carpet python in the monitor world. They've got a very similar distribution if you think about it. And obviously you get the range of phenotypes in carpet pythons as well, all the way around. So it's almost like a sister species, not sister species, but it's like the monitor version of a carpet python in a way, just how widespread they are and the variability you get.
Yeah, well, they're definitely particularly before they were split into different species. Tristis was definitely the most widespread dwarf monitor out there. Like they just all terrain.
Very adaptable.
And here's a cool one. This is a very nice shot from Jules Farquhar from northwestern New South Wales. But basically, I've kind of hesitated from going too specific on locality information. But this one's from a population from north of Broken Hill. That's probably one of the southernmost occurring populations of tristis, particularly on the eastern side of their range. And there aren't too many photos of them, but yeah, what a cracking animal, you know what I mean? With that nice yellow-red sort of dorsal pattern, and then the contrasting, black head and tail. That seems to be pretty consistent with that population.
Nice.
Well, based on a limited number of photos, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So everything we've been speaking about previously, this is Varanus tristis. And then we move on to, which was, probably apart from the last thing, which was pretty obvious, but this is the thing that we've all known for a long time now, that these guys are definitely different to the normal tristis and probably do deserve their own species status.
Yeah, so here we go. That northeastern cluster that didn't show any significant genetic admixture with any of the other clusters, and so here we have Varanus orientalis distributed, throughout eastern Queensland, east of the Carpentarian Gap, basically from you'll see when we get to some of the maps there, but they definitely occur, from the Cape York Peninsula south to the New South Wales Queensland border, and they definitely get. Well, I shouldn't say definitely, but there is a couple of records from northernmost New South Wales, sort of across the border from some of the other records. Sorry, getting a bit tongue-tied there, but yeah. And as you can see, how different are those looking to what we've covered previously?
Yeah. When you see so many and then you switch over to these, I think that's the and also getting that light-colored head thing out. That's the really important thing of the message of this presentation is, you know, to forget about the head color, because that's what we've all been sort of been told for the last God knows how many years. But yeah, you know, the pattern on these guys is a lot more distinct, a lot more freckled, which I think they've suggested is the common name for them. Will is the freckled monitor for these guys.
Yeah. Yep.
What are they calling the just a normal tristis then? What did they say for the common name for that?
They recommended the black-tailed monitor.
Okay.
Which is like they've had a few different names over the years. Like those Southwest WA ones, I think they've also been called the morning monitor. You know, because they're all black. It's like there was morning. And then
there's
I don't know.
Racehorse going on. I don't know if that was a pretty generic term across a lot of Australia, or that was for tristis.
I can't remember. That might have applied to a couple of different things, but I have to double check. And then obviously there's kind of, I guess, what I'm most familiar with growing up was tristis was always the black-headed monitor, right? Which obviously they don't all have black heads.
Yeah, that's right. Throwing the spanner in the works.
Yeah, I still kind of run with that a little bit just out of habit, you know. But yeah, these guys are definitely the freckled monitor, and it's occasionally people refer to them as a freckled tree monitor, and I would just like to say that they definitely are a bit more ecologically diverse than that. They're not just a tree monitor. They definitely occur in, you know, sort of rocky habitats as well and stuff. So I'd probably, you know, freckled monitor is you know, excellent.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and so here we go. On that previous slide as well, I just very quickly, sorry.
Yeah.
On the left there, I've got sort of an individual from the southern half of their range from the Brigalow belt, and on the right there, I've got obviously one from North Queensland. And you can see even within these guys how much variation there is. You know, similarly to tristis, you know, you've got these sort of smaller and a bit more, I guess, uniform in appearance ories from, I guess, the southern half of their range. Like that's a pretty good sort of example of what they look like throughout a large area there, from sort of, you know, the New South Wales Queensland border up to sort of central Queensland and even approaching places like Charters Towers. Almost, they still sort of stay relatively, you know, uniform. And then in North Queensland, things get more interesting. You know what I mean? But yeah, we can go on to the next one there. But those are both my photos there, and a couple of in situ shots of them doing what they do best, hanging out in trees.
Yeah, they're great in situs, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's another Brigalow belt one. That's just to give you an idea. That's pretty standard based on what I've seen of the Brigalow belt animals. You know, they're
darker post-ocular stripe here. Those other tristis have a little bit like a faded stripe, but it's getting more, you know, a lot more darker in these orientalis.
Definitely, 100%.
Wow, that's a nice one.
Yeah, that's a really nice population. I got to go back and get some better photos of them, but they're yeah, me and a mate used to call them yellow-headed ories. You know what I mean? Just as a colloquial or informal sort of, you know, term to refer to them. But yeah, got this gorgeous golden yellow head coloration there. Nicely defined pattern and a bit of red through the dorsal pattern there as well. And they just occur along the coastline in various areas of northern Queensland. And they are one of those populations that will definitely, you know, extensively use rocky habitat as well as, you know, arboreal habitat.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, I don't want to say too much, but yeah, they're an awesome lizard. I love the things, eh?
Yeah. So cool.
Yep. Here we go. A couple of these are pretty stock standard from all through that savanna country and the dry tropics of northern Queensland. These two were, you know, photographed. I'd say less than 100 meters from each other.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then in the same area as that one that I mentioned earlier, that I said was, you know, was a little bit less clear with like the freckled pattern and all that on that morphological slide. So, but just to give you an idea of how variable that these populations can be, even in one little localized spot, you know, like those animals look, you know, relatively different in terms of color. So just to showcase, you know, particularly in the Australian hobby, people seem to think that an animal has a locality on it, and that means that that's what the animal's from that area look like, when in reality, it is, you know, the more time I've spent out in the bush, man, like there's so much more variation even within one area than people ever realize, you know. I'm constantly blown away by it.
Yeah, also with breeding localities, it's pretty hard because as keepers, we always pick the best ones, which obviously doesn't happen in the wild, and they're a lot more varied. You know, there's a almost like, it's hard to say, but there's like a look of from that locality, but within that like you're saying there, Will, there's a variance. But I think what happens when people do these localities and they pick the best ones of the best ones, that becomes, you know, that's what that locality looks like. I had it with what was it? I think it was Stimpson's pythons from the Pilbara or something like that. And then we get, you know, these are Broome locality ones, these are Pilbara locality ones. And then you get there and you're like, oh, there's a massive array of difference. But yeah, if you had that in the hobby in Europe, this was, and I'm guessing it happens in Australia as well. But no, that's definitely not one from, you know, the Pilbara or something like that. And it's like, there's a lot more variance in the locality than, you know, what we see. We sort of selectively breed localities as much as we do other stuff as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Definitely. And I might as well mention it, you know what I mean? Just as an example, I think we'd both be familiar with is, you know, the yellow Ackies, and people in the Australian hobby saying, you know, that the Ackies are, you know, yellow at Dejara, when in reality, you know, you can go there and, mate, you can find a reddish colored thing, you know, next to a orangey thing, next to a yellow thing. And even though there's, I guess you say, different morphological traits that are consistent, you know, the coloration is just a lot more variable than what you'd expect, you know?
For sure.
All right, onto our first map. So look, I want to preface this by saying I'm doing my best to work with what I've got here, and the point of this particular map is kind of just so people can get a clearer indication of, you know, which species occurs where. And then obviously we've got those two grey areas there, and I probably should have made them a little bit wider just to save myself a bit here, but we're going to cover that in a little more detail in the following slide. But the point of this map is basically to kind of give people a really good idea of, you know, if you find an animal that's, you know, from essentially, you know, west of that grey area, you know, your odds on it being a tristis are pretty damn good. And, you know, the same from the eastern side there, your odds are pretty good of an orientalis.
It's pretty definitive when you put it like that. Obviously, we've got this grey sort of contact zone. But I was going to ask you earlier, if you find an orientalis on Cape York, sorry, if you find a tristis type animal on the Cape York, that will definitely be orientalis now.
Oh yeah. No, I've never seen anything that would key out to tristis from the Cape York Peninsula.
Right.
And then with those two grey areas there, you can see I've labelled them potential biogeographic barrier and potential contact zone. And look, I didn't really the terminology is, I guess, my best effort at the moment with the data I have. But just to explain that, I'm not saying that those two species, you know, don't occur in either of those zones. I separated them because the lighter grey, you know, potential biogeographic barrier zone is comprised of the Carpentarian Gap, which is a known biogeographic barrier for certain taxa in Northern Australia, including to what splits, you know, Ackies and Citrinus and stores potentially from what we know. And also I've you know, extended that down into the central downs of the Mitchell Grass Downs, which we'll get into on following slides as well, just based on some of my observations. And then, you know, with that contact zone there, that's really me just kind of saying, look, to the west of this, I've got tristis records. To the east, I've got orientalis records. I don't know currently, you know, the nuances of how that works. Do you know what I mean? But just here's a pretty good indication of what you have if you were out there, you know. And I don't even, you know what I mean. Like, I'm not even 100%, you know, sure on what the specifics are on the two species, you know, where they're sympatric and where they, you know, if they do contact in certain areas and what that means. There's a lot of more, you know, data and research and a lot more exploration really to be done still, you know, to understand these lizards.
For sure. But yeah, if you're far west, you're into tristis zone, and like I said, the Cape York's a pretty good example then, and then obviously the eastern coast, as you sort of come down. You know, this all around Cairns and stuff here, isn't it?
Yeah, Cairns and Townsville and all that.
that's going to be Orientalis. So if you really want to find one and be 100% sure, go really far, you know, to the Pilbara for Tristis, and then go to Cairns or up to the Cape York for your Orientalis maybe.
Yeah, and stay away from those grey areas if you want to be sure.
Awesome.
All right, so this is a bit. I'm not going to lie, I'm not entirely happy with it. It's a bit cluttered, but just to give people a bit of a detailed overview of what's going on in Queensland, at least. Every single one of those points is based on a photographic record. That's either my own of animals I've found and documented, or we've got a few records there that are contributed by mates with photos, and also a few that I've pulled off of platforms such as iNaturalist and Atlas of Living Australia, which, you know, again, we're working with what's available, but basically, as you can see here, I've kind of outlined an approximate sort of area that is the Carpentarian Gap, and then the Central Downs, the Mitchell Grass Downs. The reason being is in the north of these two species range, I don't have any records from those areas, and based on my own sort of herping, I guess you'd say, particularly in the Mitchell Grass Downs, within the interior of the Central Downs, I think it would represent a reasonable barrier to gene flow between populations, right? So I'm not saying that they don't persist out there in some bloody fence post along a waterway or something, but, you know, these barriers might be sufficient that gene flow has kind of been limited to the point where it's not really meaningful, right? So yeah, I'm trying to do my best to give sort of to sort of delineate where one begins and the other ends,
Yeah.
right?
Which is a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, and definitely on the fringes, right? Like you will 100% get Tristis in the Mitchell Grass Downs, you know, particularly on the southern and the western fringes, like 100%, you know what I mean? And same with the Ories. I found Ories really close to Mitchell Grass Downs. Although admittedly they were still, you know, in sort of ironbark kind of semi-arid woodland. But yeah, more research. I'd love to know more about the relationship between the species in the Carpentarian Gap area, because there's just not a lot of information out there. And just to give people an idea as to, you know, what the Carpentarian Gap is, essentially, right now that area is kind of more or less underwater. In the wet season, like the Mitchell Grass Downs and that northern Queensland can get, you know, massive rainfall, and they essentially turn into like little inland oceans or seas. But then they dry right out, and it's just vast, you know, plains of essentially, you know, clay or pan or silty soils that, you know, looks virtually uninhabitable. You know what I mean? You know, where you'd find things like Spencer's monitors and collet snakes. You know, so it's a pretty extreme area. You know, hence why I think, you know, it's probably has done a pretty good job of splitting things like Ackies and Stores monitors.
Yeah. So the Gulf of Carpentaria was an inland sea in the Pleistocene, I think, wasn't it? So you get a lot of you know, it was a barrier for a lot of stuff then, and then, like as you're saying, now it's flooding as well. It's an interesting area that obviously people need to do a lot more research there. But everything, it seems to be this, you know, biogeographic barrier a lot of the times, it seems. And like I said, might do this Scalaris presentation. And yeah, probably come up again there. It comes up a lot in with Australian species.
Well, the interesting thing is here I have to say, look, more data is really the key, right? I've spent a fair amount of time out in the Mitchell Grass Downs specifically. That's why I'm kind of making a comment on it. Whereas the Carpentarian Gap's kind of also been referenced more in the actual paper and literature, you know, definitely in the Ackie paper. But yeah, I'm kind of working with what we got here, and I would always love more information. And just with a lot of this, right, you got to remember these are very remote places, and, you know, so to go there and to actually, you know, explore these areas, like, it's really just not that accessible a lot of the time, particularly like, when there is a bit of rainfall, and, things are active. Well, a lot of the time the tracks out there are completely impassable, and you'd get stuck out there and you'd be in a real bit of trouble.
Yeah.
And then when you can get out there, it's barren, it's dry as, everything's hunkered down, and you often don't see a lot out there in those sorts of time frames. So it's just a tricky one. Also, just interestingly, because you brought up the Scalaris, is the Scalaris, so the red blotched or banded form that sometimes, informally referred to as paloensis, they appear to have, not only bridged that Carpentarian gap, but they seem to follow it south essentially in all those drainage channels, right? So there's a bit of nuance at play here, you know what I mean? Where it's a little bit more complicated than, what I'm necessarily, providing here, but I'm doing my best with what I've got essentially.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, super interesting, mate. And another thing to say, a lot of these tristis animals will be sympatric with the Scalaris as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been out there looking for either, and I'll find the other one. You know what I mean? I can 100% confirm.
Sorry, mate. Don't mean to cut you off. Do you have any reason to think why they can be sympatric? Because they seem to be doing the same sort of thing. Is there any ideas you've got where they're able to sort of coexist?
Yeah. So interestingly, I think this is primarily based on that Sam Sweet, I think I want to say in the 90s, maybe 1999 paper, where he also covered obviously, Glorts and Glebopalma and that from Kakadu. But in the Tristis and Scalaris side of things, there were some sort of key differences to the two species ecology, where Scalaris had much smaller home ranges and were a lot more centered around like maybe a handful of trees.
Right.
And they would primarily eat, I believe, invertebrates. I think in the whole study, like even though they pursued maybe skinks and stuff, on the ground for briefly, I don't think he actually recorded seeing one captured, but they were definitely eating a lot of invertebrates. In contrast, the Tristis had much larger home ranges, like significantly. Like, read the paper; it's fascinating. It's really good if you want to learn more about these animals. And the Tristis, I think, were a lot more active on the ground, foraging extensively and catching, particularly a lot of lizards, I believe, from memory.
Right. Yeah.
So interestingly, in my opinion, maybe this could be what we're going on with how Scalaris have bridged that gap there. But I'd almost say the Scalaris are really good at living in a hollow, or a handful of hollows and a handful of trees, and hunkering down, when times are tough. You know what I mean? They're really good at putting weight on, especially based on what I've seen in captivity. Able to sort of slow the metabolism down, or maybe they just naturally have the metabolism is just always a tad slower. But Tristis in comparison have a much faster metabolism, or it seems, right? And they're a lot more active. So I don't think they're able to hunker down as much during periods of adverse conditions potentially, right? So I'm getting anecdotal with it here, but I'm trying to answer the question with a bit of information, and then hopefully more information, things become clearer, Yeah,
it makes sense. It's a bit like the Glautri and the Glebopalma, going back to the food source. I think the Glebos are eating a lot more lizard prey. The Sam Sweet paper that he did on the spatial ecology. Do you know, I never bothered reading the Tristis and Scalaris one. I've got it in a Mertensilla book. Published it now, and I've never read it. I'll have to read it. That's naughty of me. I forgot he'd even done one. I was so focused on bloody Glebopalma. I'll go back and read that.
All about the rock monitors, mate.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that makes perfect sense that they're eating something completely different. So anything else you want to say on this slide, mate?
Just as you can see, we're lacking a bit of data there once we get south of the central downs, which by the way, sorry, just to be clear, that's a sub region of the Mitchell Grass Downs, which is a bioregion in Australia. There's some really good mapping out there if you want to look into the Australian bioregions. But basically, they approach each other like to the point where they probably very well could be sympatric in sort of the southern, southeastern, central downs and in the adjacent desert uplands. But there's just not a lot of data. And as we go south from there, again, it's just a tricky one. It's just a lack of data, but I'm not entirely sure what's, either keeping them separate or what happens when they approach each other. But like just one example there, as you can see, I've got a photo, that photo of one from the Mulga lands and then one from the Brigalow belt. And those animals, you know, I'd say those populations get pretty close to each other on, you know, on an east to west kind of axis there. And it, you know, I'd love to, if anyone's listening to this and they have more information and interesting records in different places, I'd love to hear more because, yeah, like I said, it's just a lack of data is kind of the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Anything more on that one?
I think we're good, mate. I'm going to ramble otherwise if we keep going.
No, you're good. You're good.
Cool. And then, yeah, so just a couple more photos of tristis there. So we got one from the Barclay Tableland in the Northern Territory there on the top left, which is, you know, as you can see, even though it's from quite far north, in fact, it's, you know, on par, if not further north than that animal on the right, which is from northwest Queensland, sort of in the vicinity of, say, roughly Dejara, which, you know, I'm just trying to sort of say that there might be a little bit more going on there with that, you know, southeastern versus widespread population. You know what I mean? Like just because I'm not sure, you know, what's going on there where you've got this group of animals that's very consistently light-headed, and then just to the west of them, you've got another population that's very consistently, you know, as dark as that. Like that's very typical of them, you know.
Okay.
Just throwing some more, just some more information out there, just to sort of show the nuance to it. And then beneath that, we've got photos of the Mitchell grass downs. So the one on the right there is from the Central Downs, that region, after a good bit of rainfall. So it's looking pretty good. Yeah. And then I've kind of cheated there on the left. That's not from the Central Downs, but it is very similar. It's from far western Queensland, just to give people an idea of what it can look like, you know, when it hasn't had rain, which is probably, you know, most of the time, or it used to be anyway.
Pretty miserable. Looks like the moon.
Yeah, and it's honestly, mate, that Central Downs area, when I first started going out there, like it looked worse than that. Like you wouldn't even have dead grass, mate. It'd just be hundreds of kilometers of just dirt, you know, like maybe some prickly acacia, which is an invasive plant species from Africa, I think, you know, with these big thorns on it. But like, it was just nothing, mate. It was baked, you know.
So just find a tree in this sort of area and you get a tristis, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you definitely think so. I know. Yeah, I'd like to say so, but then it's been trickier than I would have liked. You know what I mean? Like on the fringes for sure, near waterways, 100%. You know, but in the interior and the guts of it, you know, it's been slow going on that front.
Oh, you don't listen to me. Well, if I say something's easy, mate, then it never is. That's my thing. I've stopped saying things now, and I'll go herping. I don't say, "Oh, we're going to find them today," or something stupid like that. Oh, they should be easy.
Yeah, it's funny how.
Go on, sorry.
It's funny how herping makes you a bit superstitious, you know.
For sure. I took some people out last night. I think it was down to this bit of bamboo. I've been going out regularly. At night here, we had some pretty good weather, and there was like 4 or 5 Aetilla, which is the vine snakes, in this bit of bamboo for probably like the last 2 weeks. I was like, oh yeah, they'll be easy. They'll be down there. There's going to be at least one down there. And the last 3 nights, none have been there at all. They've been a struggle to find. So you just never know.
Yeah, always the way.
We went out. I think it was yesterday. Last night, yesterday night. And there was a gecko in every single hole in this wall. I was like, oh, these little Monarchus geckos are pretty cool little rock loving sort of gecko. And then we went out last night, and this is literally the same area, not a gecko in sight. I mean, and then we were just sort of talking about Australia as well, as you know, you just hit it right, and it's literally one night different. The weather's been pretty consistent. But yeah, it can be like a gecko night or a frog night or whatever, and it, you know, that's just herping. What makes herping great, I suppose, but not when you haven't found one, and that makes it annoying.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's definitely. You know what I mean? I think most of us go out there and you have a good night and you go back in the same conditions and you have a terrible night and you're just kind of left wondering, what the hell do I actually know what I'm doing, or is it all just luck? You know,
it's all just luck. For sure. So wrap those up. So yeah, I think we did a really good job on on those. I hope people are sort of a bit more understanding. Like I said, go back and read through that paper, or maybe have a look through this presentation again and look at some of those pictures. But yeah, the big takeaway from this and what's now been proven is that light heading thing doesn't make it orientalis. They're just too phenotypically different. But as you're getting over to that sort of East Coast and then the Cape York, well, we've got a brand new species. So I don't know who's winning the competition now between Australia and Indonesia for a varanid species. But yeah, as soon as we get one in Indonesia, it seems that Australia get two. So I think you still might be the king of the varanids over there.
Yeah, well, we're not done yet. I'll say that much. There's definitely more on the way. Probably more from the Tristis complex too.
Yeah. But yeah, something really interesting out of this paper, and we're going to cover this again, Will, with the Scalaris bit we want to do.
Yep.
But yeah, this Varanus corunda, like I said, I've never found them. Super interesting. I've seen them in books for years and was like, that can't be a Scalaris or a Tristis. But yeah, do you want to just explain what this paper proved?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, just to give some context, I think herpers or hobbyists in Australia have kind of known that the old rainforest or wet tropic Scalaris have been a little bit different for a very long time, particularly based on the fact that they possess, enlarged spur clusters on either side of the vent, which is very similar to, well, definitely Ories and Tristis, right? Not seen in the other Scalaris types. But this paper, kind of, I guess, officially demonstrated that genetically that they're completely separate from the other Scalaris, and they're a lot more closely related to the Tristis, Scalorts, and Ories, and that sort of clade or complex of species. So yeah, and back in 1985, the old Wells and Wellington, as they were kind of going ham with it, they happened to describe these guys as Varanus corunda from the locality of Coranda in far north Queensland near Cairns. And so yeah, they've got a win on this one. And it's officially being supported, all these decades later with genetic research. And so yeah, we've got the spotted rainforest monitor from the wet tropics of North Queensland.
Yeah, they begrudgingly had to use the name from what I read in that paper, which I've had a bit of an issue with that. But like I said, it's definitely a new species, and sort of Wells and Wellington obviously saw it, but someone else has to do the hard work to make it official by the seams of it, which is, not to be too sore on the matter, seems to be how it works in taxonomy at the moment. So, but yeah, it's definitely a new species, and it's a good name as well. That's the good thing about it. It's not like it was a stupid name.
Yeah. I'm honestly, mate, I've been calling them coranda since I was like 12, so I'm fine with it.
Sure.
And and these guys, I'll just to give some context. When I was living up in North Queensland, I've seen heaps of these all through the wet tropics, from the Paluma Range, north up into the tablelands, inland of Cairns and all that, and they're a very common monitor throughout a lot of areas there. But since moving south and getting into photography, unfortunately, I haven't really been. I've gotten up there a bit, but every time I go looking for them in the rainforest, mate, I get caught in the wet season, and the rainfall is just horrendous, and I end up going inland to get away from the rain, and it's just an ongoing cycle, because these guys aren't really active over the cooler months. Like, you got to be up there when it's hot, for them, at least in my experience. Usually, like, when you're in the rainforest and it's like 38 degrees, like just baking hot, like I end up seeing heaps of them. But then, the other side of that is that they're little missiles, man, and you'll see them 50 meters up a path shooting up a tree. They're onto you.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're an awesome monitor, man. They're a stunning species to see. And it's nice to actually have a dwarf monitor that's recognized as distinct, that's conquered the wet tropics, because I think they're pretty much the only one. You get Ories on the periphery and the fringes, but you've got a proper rainforest one.
Yeah, so they're just completely evolved, a bit like the again, going back to carpet pythons, maybe that like sort of rainforest form, but obviously these are their own species.
Yeah. That's actually probably quite a good comparison to be. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But also they do occur. I will just to be clear, I've also found them. I'm not the only one. Plenty of people have probably found them as well, but they do occur in a lot of like upland sclerophyll, so eucalyptus wood, like tall woodland that's adjacent to rainforest.
Yeah.
So
Get these
just to be clear.
Are these the ones that you get in Atherton as well? Is it?
Oh yeah, man, they are
Yeah.
all through that whole tableland area. They are really common.
Is it pretty dry there, Will? I've never been over there. Or is that still wet tropics?
Yeah, I think it still counts as wet tropics. It's a really interesting area though, because like the Mariba, if you know where that is, that's obviously a little bit drier, right? But it's very close to Atherton and Malanda and Tarsley and Millamilla and all that.
Right.
And a lot of those areas are like they would have been previously rainforest, but they've been cleared for agriculture to such an extent that you almost wouldn't know it.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely around Atherton. It's still rainforest technically, although yeah, it's kind of, I guess it's a bit of a shell of its former self, as it would have been,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I just remember seeing lots of pictures. I'm sure it was of these Varanus corunda, and it said Atherton scalaris or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Man. I think to give people an idea on the range, they sort of occur from the Paluma Range, which is just north of Townsville, north almost all the way to Cooktown. Sorry. So like sort of Shipton's Flats and a bit further north beyond that, if people know where that is. So it's a pretty good distribution, and then they kind of just go inland as far as the edge of the rainforest and some of that eucalypt woodland goes before they kind of, I assume they just kind of peter out and the Ories and the Scalaris take over.
Okay, they don't come up into the Cape, the Lockerbie or anything like that. That turns into Scalaris, then, does it?
Yeah, so Iron Range and Lockerbie is definitely for lack of a better term, until someone goes into the Scalaris complex and sorts that out. Yeah, they're Scalaris.
Okay.
But I mean, to be fair, those Scalaris themselves from the Cape that are kind of in those rainforest environments, they're more broadly distributed though, right? They, that sort of type of Scalaris does seem to extend out into the savannas and stuff as well. Yeah,
makes sense. Well, that brings us to the end, mate, of that. So good, Will. Thank you very much. I've been asking for a lot of people to put something together like that. I hope some people have been inspired. I hope people have enjoyed watching / listening to it. Something a bit different for the podcast world, like doing presentations like this. So yeah, that's a fair bit of work to put in there, but yeah, a bit more educational. I hope people have enjoyed that, and we've got some special lizards on there that we won't talk about. But yeah, thanks for including them as well. Very cool.
Yeah, no worries, man. Shit, man. I'll talk about this stuff, and I think a lot of people get sick of hearing me talk about it, to be honest with you. So I'm more than happy to come on and ramble on and have a chat about tristis. They're great lizards, and I've been obsessed with them for quite a while. So it's a great opportunity. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
I hope your listeners found it interesting.
yeah. I like I said, I really want to do more sort of podcasts or videos like this. Just something, like I said, something a bit different from the interview style. And this is real cutting edge stuff that's probably not going to go into books for a number of years yet. This sort of information, that paper has only just come out, and then to have all these pictures and showing it in layman's terms, like I said to you, I was like, oh, Will, can you please explain this? This paper looks, great compared to the other one we were discussing, which, didn't have any work in it, not to do with anything Australian, but I was like, oh, this is almost too much for me. I like to think I know a little bit about stuff, but yeah, to just get it all out with pictures and stuff is really good. So yeah, excellent job, mate. Thank you so much. And then we'll get you on for the Scalaris one soon. So yeah, don't rest up too much.
Give me a little bit of time on that one though, because I'm going to try and get out there and try and photograph some more populations, and fingers crossed, they're tricky.
Yeah, the only problem is some German people might jump on it before anyone else. That's the issue. We were really lucky with this when we hit it just right, where somebody's done the work, and it's tricky with this taxon. I'm feeling the other end of it of people sit on this stuff for a long time, put a lot of work in, and it can be swooped underneath you by some people, just getting in there a bit before you or using your work and stuff, especially for the Australian stuff that's you've got your famous bloke over there. So it's nice to have actually had a published paper and then go over it. So yeah, awesome, mate.
Yeah, well, hopefully it was all relatively accurate what I've said, and I haven't mixed anything up too much from the paper, but Carlos
and
yeah.
I just want to say a big thanks. Sorry to cut you off. A big thank you to all the people that we've robbed the photos off. Between me and Will. That's really helped us out with this, and I hope you're not offended. But yeah, we've credited you throughout. But yeah, it takes a lot of work to get out and take these photos. So yeah, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's massive thank you to everyone with the photos, because we've tried to use as much of our own stuff as we possibly can, as you can probably tell, but it's a very big country and there's a lot of lizards out there. And also I just I sort of wanted to say thanks to Carlos and the other researchers that put it together, and they've done a great job with this paper, and they did an excellent job with the previous one with the Ackies and the Citrinus and Stora and Ocriatus and all that. So it's been unreal to see some work being published on Australian dwarf monitors and getting some of these taxonomic kind of species complexes and things kind of figured out.
Yeah, 100%. Really good science. Well put together, and then explained by you perfectly, Will. And I think that's a good way to wrap up. So yeah, like I said, if anyone's been inspired by Will putting something together, it doesn't have to be monitors. It can be anything, but I think these sort of shows are pretty good to do every now and then. But yeah, just get a hold of me for that. Will, do you want to shout out any of your socials or anything, mate? Anyone got any further questions? Again, this is pre-recorded, guys. So this will go out, should be tomorrow. But if you've got any questions for me or Will, drop them in the YouTube comments, and then we can get into there. Hopefully people got some interesting questions.
Yeah, just I primarily just the Instagram, Oz_Varanidae. And then I'm on Facebook, just Will Scott. If anyone that's listened to this wants to message me and tell me what I've got wrong, which undoubtedly I've gotten something wrong. So if anyone has any information, just more photos, more data that they'd be willing to share, I'd love to hear from anyone, really. And yeah, that's either of those ways, probably the way to reach me. And yeah, thanks, man. Awesome. And awesome. I'd your original presentation / podcast on the tree monitor complex is really kind of, I guess, what was sort of the inspiration for this one. So you did a great job with that one, mate. That was unreal. I remember listening to that when it came out, and I thought, man, it'd be great if we had someone had a crack at doing these for some of the Australian stuff.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, that was the idea. If I could do my one, and it's obviously worked, it just inspires other people. Like I said, just put a PowerPoint presentation together. I can, do the slides and all that sort of stuff, and we can have a chat about it. But yeah, like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll leave it there, mate. Excellent. Cheers, guys. Thank you again for listening to Varanus Vault podcast. Please tune in again next time. Obviously, the Reptile Network has got shows 7 days a week. You've got the great Other Monitor podcast coming up next week with Brandon and Kat. So check that one out if you're into monitors. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again.